Welcome back, AP. Happy Easter, by the way. It is Easter Sunday. I know you're probably not supposed to be doing work on a day like today. You're supposed to be like eating ham and mac and cheese and hanging out with the family, which I do hope you do. All right. So if you don't do this until tomorrow, that's fine. If you don't do this until Tuesday, that's fine. I just want to give you a heads up on what's coming. There are 3 flips, as we know, each of them totaling about like 20 to 25 minutes, all right? Just because it's some thick stuff that we got to go over. It's also phenomenally interesting stuff. This is leading into the part that you all know and love, World War II, right? And this is talking about the growth of like consumer society and how art's going to dramatically change and all that stuff. But before we get to all that, let's go ahead and wrap up World War I, shall we? All right, so I will also send out all the stuff about the DBQ. It'll probably end up just being due like when we come back eventually. Just because it's just going to make it easier on everybody else to do that. Special consideration and shout out to Shane and Christina for already turning theirs in early. But I'll send all that out in an email probably to tomorrow. I'm not gonna burden you with work over on Easter itself. So let's get after it though, okay? So 1919, the peace settlement arises, right? So we're now post the officials like Treaty of Versailles, because the Treaty of Versailles was actually proposed and an armistice, not treaty, signed on November the 11th, 1918, right? So after some time and deliberation and demilitarization, de-escalation, things like that, the 1919 peace settlement arises, all right? Which is going to be what ends the war between Germany and the Allied powers. So the first proposal of peace, we started jotting this down already in class, but I told Emily O'Donnell that I would actually start on this slide. I'm actually feeling my Emily O'Donnell, Kate Miller vibes right now, drinking this iced coffee. Very good stuff. Now, the first proposal of peace, of course, is Wilson's 14 points. You've heard Mr. Cranston talk about this at length. Open diplomacy, free trade over the seas, no more unrestricted submarine warfare, reduction in armaments, we don't need all these guns, and an establishment of the League of Nations, right? The first one, or the first like version of the UN, right? Also, another big tagline that goes in there with the 14 points is national self-determination. The idea that there is a notion that people should be able to live free from outside interference and should be able to choose their own government. Basically, it's the death of empires, right? Take down the empires, no more Austro-Hungarian Empire, no more German Empire, no more Ottoman Empire. Let the people of which you control, let them go. Let them go and let them choose their own culturally appropriate government, right? So you're going to see a very chopped up like Europe after this. But as we all know, the 14 points wasn't quite enough for some people, right? Because the Paris Peace Conference, the other European powers are going to choose to neglect the 14 points, right? So at the Paris Peace Conference, you have the rise of the big 3, right? The big 3 include United States, Great Britain, France, right? So unfortunately, when you're really looking at it, it's more like the big 2 and the one pissed off one, right? So because it's like US, Great Britain, and France, like, and just like super frustrated with everything that's going on. And don't get me wrong, they should be frustrated. They were openly invaded by an outside power. So I get it, all right? But me thinks that you're still kind of mad about the Franco-Prussian War and that whole Paris Commune thing, all right? So now the big 3 heads of state, of course, during the big 3 power are David Lloyd George from Great Britain, George Clemenceau from France, used to own a newspaper, and Woodrow Wilson from the United States, right? Wilson is obsessed with peace and the establishment of this thing known as the League of Nations, right? Great Britain and France, on the other hand, I want to destroy Germany, right? Like, so they look to destroy Germany. Now, this is the very, very famous photograph that was taken outside of the Paris Peace Conference. You have David Lloyd George right here. You have Orlando, the Italian leader, right here, chatting him up. You know what I mean? They're talking about all kinds of fun stuff. And then you have George Clemenceau looking like Garfield/Walrus had a child, right? Actually hanging out right here. And then you have, of course, Woodrow Wilson with the nice tails on the suit, I might add. All right? So, anyway, but that is the Paris Peace Conference, right? And at that peace conference, the Treaty of Versailles is going to be thrown out there, right? Clemenceau's demands for the Treaty of Versailles, the complete demilitarization of Germany, which is a little aggressive. Reparations, which is also a little aggressive. And then a buffer state between France and Germany. called the Rhineland. All right, so now, of course, Wilson is going to say this is just going to start another war. Like, what are we doing here? This is insane. Stop. All right, so they come to a compromise. Even though the compromise was a little tiny bit better, Wilson refused to ratify it. The United States of America never ratified the Treaty of Versailles. We also never joined the League of Nations because it's not what we originally intended. All right, so the compromise was the creation of a League of Nations, of which Germany isn't even allowed to be in. That's messed up. All right, so military reduction, right? So take Germany down to, 100,000 standing troops. I don't even think it's that many. I think it's like 15,000 standing troops and like 15,000 sailors. And like no more submarines. They had to get rid of all those, right? So chop up Europe, no more empire. So Wilson got a win, right? He got one big win. But don't chop up all of the Slavic republics. Make them one big thing called the Yugoslavia, right? That's really stupid. Now, anyway, the reparations for Germany, huge amount. So Wilson lost that one as well. Germany has to give up all of its colonies and give them over to the big three under the League of Nations. Another win for Wilson, right? So, and then, of course, the Rhineland. Now, the Rhineland wasn't going to be what France originally intended. France wanted almost a borderline autonomous buffer state between the two of them, right? Now, the Rhineland is occupied by German-speaking, German-descendant people. It also has Alsace and Lorraine in it. Remember that whole thing? Yeah, like so. But the French people, they want it to be completely French-occupied. But the United States says, nay, it must be occupied by Belgium, the United States, Great Britain, and France. The only way it's going to make it fair, right? So another little win for Wilson. Tiny win, but barely, right? So we never ratified the Treaty of Versailles. We never joined the League of Nations. And we wonder why this guy was getting so mad, all right? So now, granted, I'm not vindicating him. He's the biggest scumbag in all of history, and there's a special place in you-know-where for him, all right? But he is an emblem of the mad right wing of the German society, right? Because at this point, the monarchists and the conservatives of Germany are flying off the handle because they feel like they're being betrayed by their own people, right? So, because their own people are agreeing to these documents. And a big part of this document was this thing called the War Guilt Clause, right? The War Guilt Clause said, it was an article inside of the Treaty of Versailles that said that declared that Germany claimed sole responsibility for the war and had to pay all of the reparations equal to all civilian damages, which is bananas. All right, so the War Guilt Clause was a really, really messed up thing. John Maynard Keynes is an economist that shows up a little bit later. He was very, very right on when he said that this was going to actually create another world war and like just destroying Germany is going to destroy us all. So, and then we got peace in the Middle East. Ha! Not. All right, so the Ottoman Empire is going to be broken up so fast, so erratically, that Arab nationalists are going to feel phenomenally betrayed, right? Britain and France did not deliver on their promises, right? Underneath, like, Sir Lawrence of Arabia, which we talked about in class, they did not deliver on the promises that they actually had intended to give autonomous, self-determined states to these different groups, right? They imperialized the new nations after the breakup, except for Turkey, right? For example, Britain runs in and creates British Palestine, right? And they also imperialized Iraq, and they also other different areas were imperialized by Great Britain, right? So the Balfour Declaration in 1917 was a British declaration that gave support to a Zionist Jewish home state near British Palestine, which is then, of course, just going to start creating this whole Palestinian-Israeli conflict, right? And then there was this thing called the General Syrian Congress, right? The General Syrian Congress was in direct retaliation to the Balfour Declaration, which Arab leaders came together and declared Iraqi and Syrian independence. It was a revolutionary movement, and it was crushed by the European powers, right? So the dramatic exit of the Ottoman Empire, put a little star next to what I'm about to say, the dramatic exit of the Ottoman Empire and the quick breakup led to the traumatic, politically violent Middle East you know now. All right, so if we didn't just jump out of there that fast, it wouldn't have been such a big issue. Now what we're going to do is just show you a couple of pictures. I'm going to show you a few pictures because I don't feel like I showed you enough pictures during this unit, right? Because I think World War I should stick with you. I think it should be something you carry around in your heart for the rest of your life because it is a very, 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 very vile, very, very, very violent, very terrifying war, right? Because imagine for a moment you're one of these young men. You're one of these young men that is sitting in a trench that is only about 3 feet high, ducking, and there's machine gun fire overhead. And all you have with you is a bolt action rifle and the men next to you, right? You have to sleep in this trench. You have to eat in this trench. You have to do everything in there for a stalemate that gains you nothing. If you win this battle, your trench just might move forward a foot. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. It's grotesque. It's really upsetting. Or you could be one of these lucky individuals that's actually in a 6-foot deep trench, right? So that is just waiting for the next engagement to start, to be by an artillery shell, waiting to be gassed, waiting to be basically killed in ways that no one had ever seen before. Waiting, right? Like it's terrifying. It's absolutely horrendously terrifying. And the reason why I showed you 2 different trenches is because I just wanted you to remember, like, this is not a clean war. This is not something where people are like, all right, well, we're going to dig our trench and you're going to dig your trench, and they should all be a uniform height of about 6 feet. And blah, 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 blah. We have never seen in history a war like World War I. It was a one-time only war, right? Barbed wire made its appearance in warfare and claimed so many lives of suffering individuals that could not even escape their fate because they were stuck inside of this mangled mess that this tool, this item of barbed wire perfectly like personifies World War I, right? Like something that catches you and destroys you from within, right? So then also, of course, you had your industrial war, new weapons being created just for the sake of killing faster, right? So your new tanks coming around, the machine gun created originally to try to quell rebellions in imperialist nations, but then turned into fighting like people one against another that they just didn't, they had no reason to fight one another other than the overzealous carings and wants of tyrants like Wilhelm II, right? So, and then you've got that right there is an aerial photograph of no man's land right here in the middle and the trenches on the backside, right? They're actually in like very, very big zigzags like we talked about to avoid grenade blasts and things like that. But it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. You see, like, it looks like the surface of the moon. It's just littered with artillery shell holes. And then, of course, this is some of the original implementation of the gas. This is at Ypres in France, when they would actually mix them by hand, and then the winds would carry this stuff that is going to blind you immediately upon contact and cause massive pain to the people that you're actually sending it upon. Now, this is something I really wanted to show you because there's a very famous phrase from World War I. The dead are the lucky ones. So this right here is a French soldier, right? That is damage that he received to his face from an artillery blast, right? So you now had the first signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. Physically, absolutely, these new weapons physically deformed the men that fought in this war. Just absolutely ravaged their bodies and their physical appearance, leading to dramatic psychosis, right? Like crazy psychological issues. And the reason why I want to show you this is just because these things happen doesn't mean that good people aren't out there to try and bring us out of it. This is what he looked like before. This is what he looked like after Anna Caldwell Ladd, I believe that's her name, Anna Caldwell Ladd, started a shop in France to try and create masks for men to wear to cover the marks of war. And the years between 1919 and 1939, I think that she serves as a great example. They were just a mask. They were a mask. Like the art changed, the literature changed, everything changed, and we were just eking along as a society and as a history and as a people trying to figure out, how do we put away what just happened? How do we stop thinking about what just happened, right? Like, cover the trenches. Like, don't let anybody ever see them ever again. Create monuments to people we don't even know their names anymore because they were just so, their bodies were so destroyed that we can't even identify them, right? Because the human cost was outrageous in World War I. 1% of the world population perished in this war. On a grand scale, that's insane. Like, some of you are like, well, it's just 1%. 1% of the world, though. Like, so the worst losses were by country, killed or wounded. Total mobilized was 60 million. which is actually roughly 59.7 million. Russia lost 9.5 million people, which is 75% of all their forces. Germany, 5.9 million people they mobilized. They lost 54% of all their forces. French Empire mobilized 5.6 and lost 75%. The U.S., only 321,000, which is only about 8% of their forces. 8.5 million soldiers killed, including 35 million wounded, with civilians of 45 million. This is how many they mobilized. This is the percentage of them that died. Like, that's insane, right? 8.5 million soldiers killed, including 35 million wounded, 45 million civilians dead. Or 45 million civilians wounded, along with those 35 million wounded. It's insane. It's absolutely terrifying. It's a crazy, scary war that everybody in every history book always wants to just kind of look over, right? They want to just kind of brush over and be like, oh, World War I, it was a thing, trenches, ditches, whatever, right? So, and I don't think that's right. I think that's really messed up, actually. So now we're getting into the period of time between these two wars. The age of anxiety, as many people refer to it as, right? The interwar years. So go ahead and jot this down. It's a nice big new title, okay? Now, just to give you a heads up where we're going to start with intellectual trends. This is the stuff I like to start with before I get into all the politics, because I think the politics is something you got to learn about in class. So I can kind of sit there, well, not in class, but you got to learn about it last, so you can kind of sit there and then understand, it's like, oh, no wonder Hitler's message caught on so quickly. No wonder Mussolini had such an easy time, like, doing whatever he wanted to do. Stalin, what a jerk. All right, so anyway, but these trends began before the war, like late 1800s, but they were shaped during and after it, all right? So their foundation started before the war, but they came into fruition afterwards. All of these trends see a break from the assumed, okay? They drift far away from the old Europe of romanticism and realism and grandeur and rococo, and Baroque is dead, all right? Like, so none of that is coming around anymore, okay? These trends are off their rocker, all right? They are a dramatic shift, okay? So it's almost as if World War I, much like the mass I was talking about, caused society to break. Like, they broke them and changed dramatically, almost like Europe was healing from their trauma, right? So one of the big guys to talk about, first of all, we're going to talk about philosophy, because it's the one thing that you guys don't seem to want to talk about the most, so I'm going to go ahead and get it out of the way. We're going to talk about philosophy. Society is progressing, all right? So as the late 1800s, you've got social welfare on the rise, equality for women on the rise, suffrage movements on the rise, better working conditions, rising wages. But there were still critics, all right? There were a lot of critics out there in the philosophic world because of this supposed utopia that we were on our way towards. The big one out of all of them is my favorite philosopher ever. His name is Friedrich Nietzsche. All right, Nietzsche, as in knee and cha. All right, so Nietzsche. All right, so Nietzsche, German, right? Born in a very, very small German village. His father, I think, was I want to say he's like an accountant or something like that. Friedrich Nietzsche, though, started from a humble beginnings, excelled in school, and became an ancient Greek professor by his mid-20s. How insane is that, right? So his big thoughts and concepts, though, he is very critical of everything. All right, the reason why I have Matthew McConaughey right now here is not because of the look-alike. It's because if you've ever seen True Detective, if you haven't, you need to go out and check that out. But if you ever seen True Detective, Matthew McConaughey's character in it, Russ Cole, is a nihilist, right? And that is the school of thought that Friedrich Nietzsche brought around. Friedrich Nietzsche believed humans are animals, right? Like, we have to stop trying to rationalize everything. God is dead. Religion causes slave morality. Excellence is stifled by society. What Nietzsche believes is that everything society tells us as the assumed herd of people, right? We're all sheep, is that you should always turn away from conflict. He says that makes you weak. He says, you should never envy people. You should only worry about your relationship with God. He says that makes you lame and not want to be better, all right? So, he believes that slave morality has been created by religion because it's telling you to turn away from the things you want, right? He's like, if you want them, you should go get them. and all of this meaning to life is meaningless. All right, so he rejects the meaning of life and putting down religious and moral principles. He is the nihilistic guy, right? None of this crap matters unless you actually want it. If you want this coffee that bad, then drink it. All right, so next time anybody asks you that question, Emily O'Donnell and Kate Miller in school, why do you have that coffee? Be like, because I want it. Nihilism, baby. What's up, Nietzsche? He said envy is a good thing. You got to know what you want, right? If you see somebody out there that you want their things, then you know what you were supposed to be striving for, right? So I bet Lucas is going to be a big fan of this guy. Now, even though he did go insane, he died in a mental institution after about an 11-year stay there, because apparently he saw a guy beating a horse, and then he ran up to the horse. He was like, I understand you, and then went nuts. So nihilism, though, comes from the Russian word nihil, which means nothing, all right? As in none of this matters, okay? So I love Nietzsche. Basically, he's like the pre-existentialist. He's like the existentialist before existentialism came around. So speaking of that, following World War I, though, and Nietzsche's like laying of the foundation of nihilism and none of this is real and God is dead. Oh, Nietzsche also said, whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That's his big famous quote, right? So two new schools of thought come up in the philosophy standpoint. You've got logical positivism, which I like a lot. I think existentialism and logical positivism could actually correlate, but everyone refuses to do that. Logical positivism is something that like Grace Martirano would be a fan of, right? It's a philosophy that sees meaning only in provable facts. It rejects anything assumed, right? Let's not assume anything. Let's prove it, right? How can I prove these things, right? How can I prove that these things actually did what they did, actually happened, blah, 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 blah. How can I prove that light does travel through space the way it's meant to be? I got to test it, right? So now in society, logical positivism then also kind of will look down on anything like religion, happiness, or anything of those things for that matter, because you can't prove it, right? He's like, how do I know I'm happy? You can't prove I'm happy. How can you quantify happiness, right? So the downside to logical positivism is that it didn't take a lot of hold because it doesn't really appeal to the poor very well. Because the poor aren't educated enough to be able to test things and prove things and blah, blah, blah. What did relate to the poor a little bit better later on is called existentialism, right? Existentialism is awesome. I think it's a really, really cool philosophical thought, but it's, again, another kind of marker of the healing European psyche. Philosophy that stresses the meaninglessness of existence and the importance of an individual's search for morals in a place in life, right? So basically, it's not about the grand existence. It's not about your place in existence. It's about existence, period, right? So most thinkers of existentialism are atheists. They believe that existence precedes essence, right? So the diatribe in European culture up to this point has always been like, God made you for a purpose. He has the plan, religion, etc., right? Existentialism totally breaks from that. Now, we are a Catholic school, and I do not mean that those things are not true, okay? I do believe God has a plan for all of you, all right? So, however, this is just what happened in European history at the time. Now, anyway, so existentialism is life is considered meaningless. You create your own meaning, right? You are nothing. You are a speck of dirt, all right? You are just this little insignificant piece of garbage hurtling through the outer space at thousands of miles an hour. The only person who's going to give you essence is you. Go out there and figure it out, right? So more stress on the choice of an individual. What I like to say about it is it's a moral code without the baggage, right? So you create your own morals. If it makes sense to you, then it makes sense, right? Because we all exist in this together, right? So Christian existentialism, though, is going to see a big rise up as well. A Christian revival is going to happen after World War I, where many of you would be like, how can anybody like grab back onto religion after the chaos that they just saw? There was actually a dramatic jump back into like Christianity. Kierkegaard, all right? Soren Kierkegaard is a big, big thinker of Christian existentialism. Put next to his name, the leap of faith. He said that you can't quantify religion, and God doesn't want to be quantified because if he did, he would have shown himself to you. He said that big parts of religion is your leap of faith. You have to believe that he is there because you just got to take that leap, right? Take that leap. Jump into the void and believe that he is there, even though you can't prove it, right? So that's Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard. Now, and then we're going to have a dramatic shift forward in science, right? The clarification of atoms is going to come around. Marie Curie and her husband Pierre are going to analyze radium and its constant emission of subatomic particles, and then unfortunately get cancer and die later. Now, Max Planck is going to actually realize that subatomic energy is emitted in spurts, not steady streams, right? Question the relation of matter and energy, right? What is radiation? What are particles? What are waves? What is light, right? So Max Planck, very influential thinker in this entire dynamic, right? And then, of course, you had Einstein and Newton, right? Einstein's going to go even further than Curie and Planck and undermining Newton a little bit. Because he comes up with the concepts of theoretical special relativity, that time and space are relative to the observer. Only constant in the universe is the speed of light, right? So according to Einstein, the only person that can actually understand time is you. So we can't actually gauge how anyone is interpreting time. We can't guarantee that everyone is seeing time in the exact relatable moment that we are in right now. Hypothetically speaking, what if we're already back in class and you're actually like there and I'm actually just recording this flip? It's all about the observer. What am I seeing? How am I interacting with time, right? So also he believes that there was energy within atoms, right? He believed that there was actually subatomic particles within them, okay? Ernest Rutherford then realized off of Einstein ideas, the atom can be split. The man was right? So all of these ideas violate Newton's dependable laws, scarring many common people, right? Because Newton's dependable laws, force is constant. Max Planck said you're wrong. Things do not, matter can't be destroyed. Radiation says that they're kind of degrading, and turning into other things. Equal opposite reaction? Relativity said shut up! All right, so Freud is also going to go a little further with the clarifications of the id, the ego, the superego, but we already talked about all that stuff, right? So now we got one last slide, okay? One last slide, and then we're going to pick up on the literature stuff tomorrow, all right? So literature is going to be influenced by pessimism, right? Relativism and the alienation of post-World War I life. This is, again, one of the scars, the jab scars of World War I, right? Literature is going to show the wound of World War I more than anything else, all right? So writers are going to turn away from the perfect protagonist. No more of this hero versus villain. And instead, they're going to actually create more of a twisted post-personality, post-World War I individual. They're going to delve into feelings, memories, desires that were forever scrambled by the conflict, right? One of the big ones that started the whole thing off was Marcel Proust. He called his book The Remembrance of Things Past. For 10 years, he locked himself in his apartment. And all he did was write down childhood memories that he had. Because he was like, these are the memories of the time that came before the onslaught of that war. And it's like he was trying to grab on to the time that occurred before it because he was forever changed by it. On that note, we're going to stop this flip right there. And I will see you guys tomorrow when I add another flip to this. So, have a great break. Happy Easter!